Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. We're back again with more King Arthur, Knight's Tale, and this time I want to talk about Sir Ector, an Arcanist that you get very, very early in the game, but someone who has a completely different setup than some of the other Arcanists that you're going to meet over time. Let's go ahead and get into it. So the first skill we're going to talk about is Firebolt. It does 100% weapon damage against an enemy and knocks back the target. It's his main form of attack, so you probably might as well go ahead and upgrade it. The upgrades do an additional 10% armor breaking. It's going to do an increased damage against hex units, which will be no problem because you should be hexing everybody. You can break it up where it's going to fire 3 missiles instead of 1, but each one only deals 34% weapon damage. And finally, you can make it where he's going to gain 1 AP when killing an enemy with Firebolt. I feel like these 3 upgrades make sense. I don't feel like it makes sense to split up his missiles into 3. It makes sense with Merlin because Merlin gets the ability to cause burning on enemies with each missile, so you can burn 3 separate targets. He doesn't have any sort of functionality like that on his Firebolt, so I think you can safely ignore this and then just focus on these other 3. Next up is Blood Hex. Target starts bleeding and deals 30% less damage for 2 turns. As far as upgrades, you can make it so that the target's physical debuff resist is reduced by 30%. During this effect, you can reduce the cooldown. You can increase the hex intensity for Blood Hex by 50%. So hex intensity makes a particular hex more powerful. And the way it does that changes based upon what hex is being discussed. You can tell what stat is being impacted by hex intensity by the color. So as you can see here for Blood Hex, that negative 30% is in pink. That's how you know it's the stat that is controlled by Blood Hex. So if we took Black Blood and got that increase for 50% for hex intensity, then more than likely that means that 30% would be now what? Negative 45% less damage for 2 turns. I definitely feel like you should pick this up. Sir Ector, I feel like you should look at him more as someone who's causing a bunch of debuffs on enemies on the battlefield and setting them up to be killed by your team. He's not the one who's actually going to be clearing the battlefield the way some other Arcanists or Sages are built. So if you go into it understanding that he's just weakening and debuffing the enemies, then I think you're much more likely to be satisfied with what he has to offer. Next up is Slowing Hex, which is going to slow a target for 2 turns and causes movement to cost 100% more AP for that particular enemy. You can make it so that it now affects every unit in an area of 3x3, but its hex intensity is reduced by 40%. You can increase the duration by 1 turn. You can reduce the AP cost of Slowing Hex by 1, so it would actually only cost 1 AP in order for you to use it, and it can cause 10% vulnerability during its duration. So I think this is definitely great. I don't care about slow at all. I never worried about how quickly are my enemies running towards me, because more than likely if they're running towards me faster, they're running into my melee units faster and the fight is going to end faster. So personally, I like the upgrade that does this hex in a 3x3 tile area, even though it massively reduces the hex intensity, because it's going to mean more of them are hexed, more of them are vulnerable, and more of them are going to be weaker towards Sir Ector's attacks anyway. So, works for me. Next up is Magical Armor. At the start of every encounter, gain 18 armor that will only protect the hero from the first attack. You could upgrade it where it'll give him 7 more armor. It'll add an injury token for him. It'll last for 1 additional attack, and the armor is increased by 2. I personally don't bother with this. I just prefer tactically to keep Sir Ector all the way out of the way. But if you like him a little more in the mix and you've had a couple of situations where you felt like he got hit up, this will make sense for you. Extra damage. The hero deals 10% more weapon damage. I definitely feel like this makes sense. Even though he's focused more on hexes, every so often we're going to come across enemies where we just really need to do some damage. You want to make sure he's effective at that. The range of non-melee active skills is increased by 1, and you get a +1 in spellcraft. Definitely want to take this. You want his range to be as long as possible so he can stay all the way in the back. Spellcraft is going to assist you in detecting objects that have been hidden by magic, and it's going to allow you to identify the shrines that are located throughout the world. And it's important for you to be able to identify them because some shrines have negative effects. So a higher level in spellcraft will help you to determine the ones that you should not be activating. And then finally, Master Alchemist potion effects on the hero are increased by 50%. Now, usually I would say that you would ignore this. But in this particular case, actually, because he's all the way in the back and he should not be getting hit, there's a line of thinking that says he doesn't really need to bring health potions, right? So you could instead bring potions that increase his AP or allow him to do more damage. Or I don't remember if there are ones that allow you to extend the duration of your statuses or something that would be more helpful specifically to the type of hex specialist that he is. But there's definitely a case to be made that he can use some different type of potions that maybe are going to be used on a more regular basis, and that would also make this more worthwhile. So depending upon your play style and how you kit this out, this might make sense. I personally just ignore it and just put healing potions on them and move on. Next up is Fire Blast. Deals 70% weapon damage to every unit in an area of 3x3 tiles. You can set it where it ignites the ground for 2 turns. Also cause burning on all the enemies. Increase the weapon damage in its center. And the AP cost is reduced by 1. Clearly, this is well worth it and can do a massive amount of damage in the right situation. So I would definitely recommend that you pick it up and at least pick up these upgrades. The center, a lot of times enemies are bunched up against your allies. So it can be difficult to place this in a way where the enemy you really want to light up is sitting in the center. So I would say that this has limited usage, but in the right situation, you can make it work and you're going to do even more damage. You might as well pick it up for 1 point. Death Hex. Target loses 30% of its current vitality for 1 turn. You can upgrade it where it's going to do 20% vulnerability, reduce the target's mental debuff resist, cooldown is reduced by 1 turn, and add 40% hex intensity for the Death Hex. So obviously this can be a death knell for some characters, especially if you do this right before you're going to have a bunch of your heroes light a particular enemy up. This can help ensure that it doesn't make it another turn. So I would definitely recommend that you pick this up. Whether or not the mental debuff resist is useful to you depends upon the makeup of your team and what kind of powers they're going to use, but everything else I think absolutely makes sense. Master of Hexes, plus 25% hex intensity. And then as far as upgrades, you can add an additional 10%. You can make it where enemies affected by any hex have their armor reduced by 2. The AP cost of hexes is reduced by 1. The hero's weapon damage is increased by 5% for every active hex. Pick this up, pick up all of it. So you take these little small AP cost skills like Death Hex is 3 AP. Blood Hex, after you pick up this, these 2 are 3 AP. Slowing Hex costs 2 AP. And you could just light up an entire battlefield with hexes. And then once you lay down Fireball, you're going to have essentially a 15% increase to the damage that you do towards those enemies. Not to mention, all the party is going to love how debuffed these enemies are as well. He can really, really control the whole battlefield. Potent Hex, again, 20% hex intensity increase and +1 to spellcraft. Obviously, this is a no-brainer. Nexus Terror Wings gains 1 movement AP at the beginning of each turn for every active hex. You might have noticed on the screen, he doesn't have teleport. The only thing that I feel like is really missing from this kit. So everywhere he goes, he's got to walk to get there. So honestly, even though it's kind of annoying, I think you should go ahead and pick this up. If you've got 3 active hexes, then you're going to have 3 movement AP that you can use on top of whatever movement AP you might get from gear or skills from other party members. So hopefully that gives you enough where you can walk around to the spaces that you need to get to in order to target enemies. Real quick, before we move on to the last panel, if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate you hitting the like button. It helps me figure out what content the channel is enjoying and helps spread my videos to more people. I really appreciate all of your support. Okay, moving to the last panel. Wall of Flame creates a 4-tile long wall of flame. The wall lasts for 2 turns and units within its area suffer 50% weapon damage when it is cast and 20% weapon damage at the start of their turns and for every tile they move in it. You can make it cause burning, you can increase the duration, you can increase the amount of AP it costs to move through Wall of Flame, and you can increase the length by 2. So I don't know. For me, it's just too much going on. Like, I prefer plain old Fire Blast. You know, you fireball the area, you do a bunch of damage to it, and hopefully you wipe out a bunch of enemies. This, you got to be tactical with it. Make sure it's not going to impact your party members. Make sure it's not going to block your party members from going where they want to go. From a tactical standpoint, it's oftentimes very easy to figure out where melee enemies want to walk to. So you can absolutely place this in a way where it almost forces the enemy to walk through it. It's just not my personal cup of tea, but you can make your own decision about whether or not this works for you. Master of Fire, obviously this is going to make sense if you've taken both Fireball and Wall of Flame. If you're only going to use Fireball, for me, it's still worth it, but you can make your own decision about whether or not it's worth it to you. It's going to give you this 10% increase for weapon damage to fire skills. Then it's going to give an additional 30% weapon damage increase for burning effects. You can increase the turn duration for burning. Weapon damage for units affected by burning is increased. And killing a unit reduces all currently running cooldowns on fire skills by 1 point. So all of that together is really going to help you make the most out of Fire Blast and Wall of Fire. Spell resistance. You can decrease the damage from incoming spells by 25%. Upgrades will make you immune to burning. You can further reduce the damage by 10%. You can gain 15% mental debuff resistance, and you can fully negate the effects of the first incoming spell in each encounter. I completely ignore this. He should be way in the back, and anytime he moves further up, there should be a ton of enemies out in front of him that are going to distract the enemies from trying to target him. So I don't feel like the point investment is worth it. Spell power. Range of skills is increased by 1 tile, and their weapon damage is increased by 10%, plus 1 to spellcraft. No brainer. Pick this up. Mindstorm. If at least 3 skills are on cooldown, casting a skill reduces all currently running cooldowns by 1 turn. Definitely pick this up. So again, you've got all these hexes which should be constantly running. Every time they come off cooldown, you should just throw out another one onto an enemy who doesn't have that particular hex. So yeah, this is a no-brainer. You're constantly going to be dishing out skills and cooling them down at the same time. And finally, we have Strong-Willed, a 30% mental debuff resistance increase. Again, he shouldn't be getting hit. Mental debuff is not something he should need. So I don't pick this up, and I just keep him in the back. And that is all of the abilities for Sir Ector. As you can see, he does have the ability to deal some damage. But really where he shines is being able to take really negative, bad status effects and constantly apply them on enemies in the battlefield. Great stuff. He could be a fantastic crowd controller in the right hands. Hope all of you have enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a like, share this content, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.